Welcome to Lola's Frugal Life Podcast. If you're on a mission to be more frugal with both your time and money, you're in the right place. In this podcast, we talk about topics that help enhance living a frugal lifestyle. The goal is to save time and money where we can so that we can use the rest on what matters most to us. We talk a lot about both time and money management so that we can waste as little as possible on both. We do this while also embracing a progress over perfection mindset. If that sounds good to you, then please stick around for the latest episode right after a few quick words from our sponsor.
Do you want to be part of something bigger? At Siemens, we use AI to transform the everyday. Our engineering solutions drive innovation and change. We're leading in technology and building a sustainable future. Join Siemens and make an impact to transform the everyday. Apply now and be part of something extraordinary. Visit siemens.co.in/careers.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Lola's Frugal Life Podcast. Today, before we get into the topic, the only thing I really wanted to share, well, besides the reading of my favorite meal, is one loving lately. I don't really have much of a life update right now. Just transitioning into the new season and trying to accept that summer is coming to an end, which is my favorite season, but it's okay. I will get into the fall stuff and enjoy it. It's just something I have to make myself love every year, but I will wind up loving it. I just do not love the winter, but I will find things to love about it as it comes. But the one thing loving lately that I definitely wanted to share is shared albums on the iPhone. I don't know if Android phones have something similar, but my family all has iPhones, and we were on a family vacation recently with some extended family, and I just learned about creating a shared album, and some of you probably already know about this, I'm sure, but basically a shared album is a photo album on your phone in your photos that you can share with others. So you basically just invite others. They do have to have an iPhone, but you send them a link or you send them an invite by using their cell phone number to the shared album. And then everyone can add pictures to the shared album and everyone can see the shared album. So it was really cool, like being on a vacation with family. And when people took pictures, they could add them to the shared album so we could all see the pictures from the trip, rather than everyone saying, can you text me those? Can you send me those photos? So we all got to see all of the photos that we wanted to share with each other. So that was really cool. And then when we came back, I actually created a new one for my immediate family for our Dollywood trip that we had done earlier in the summer. And my kids were able to add some photos to it that they had on their phones and things like that. So it's really a cool feature if you have an iPhone. And like I said, I'm guessing Androids probably have something similar, but you can't share it like in between. I don't believe you can. Like if you have an iPhone and you have someone with an Android and you want to like share the same album, I don't think you can because it's like part of the iPhone, I believe. But anyway, that is my loving lately. I think that is such a cool feature. And I just wanted to let you know in case any of you don't already know about that. So as far as reading right now, I am currently listening to The Life She Was Given. I forgot to put the author. I'm sorry. But anyway, it's called The Life She Was Given. Goodreads rating is 4.10. I'm really enjoying this book so far. It starts out with a girl who sees the circus from her bedroom. She's not allowed to explore her outside. She's never even been outside of her room. And then her mother winds up selling her to the circus. It's really sad when that happens. The book winds up going through her whole story, and obviously I'm not gonna say what happens at the end, one, because I don't know yet, and two, because I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's a really good story so far. I'd say I'm probably about halfway through it, so I'm really enjoying it right now. If that sounds good to you. I haven't finished anything else recently to share, and I'm actually almost done finally reading one book that I'm reading in digital format on my Kindle called I'll Stop the World. I'm almost done with that. Like I'm down to like the last few pages, so I'll probably share that with you next week probably. And then I have another book that I'm reading on Kindle also, which I'm probably about close to halfway through. I think that one's called The Lost Bookshop. Those were both free books that I got from Kindle. I keep one on my phone, on the Kindle app in my phone, and then one on my actual Kindle. And the only reason I do that is because I had trouble a couple of times with the Kindle phone app not syncing with my actual Kindle, and it drove me crazy because then I wouldn't know exactly where I was supposed to be in the book. So now I have one going on my Kindle app on my phone and one on my actual Kindle. So anyway, so that's that. My favorite meal this week was sausage and vegetable sheet pan dinner. I also added some boneless chicken thighs and some green beans from our garden and put it all on the pan and baked it. I love sheet pan meals. I don't have that many that I make, but I just love something that you can just like cut everything up and put it on a pan, season it, put it in the oven, let it all bake together, and it just comes out and it's done, one whole meal. So I really enjoyed making that, and it tastes really good. I love like the sausage and the chicken and the vegetables all together, and it was nice to add the green beans in from our garden. So that was my favorite meal this week. So this week I wanted to talk about cooking meals the frugal way. So cooking and meals, the cost of meals is unfortunately something that we all have to deal with. There's really no way of getting out of having to have an expense for cooking related to your meals, but you can do things that can make your cooking a little bit more frugal. Number one tip for frugal cooking, which I'm sure you all know I'm going to say, is meal planning. So for me, that's been one of the best tips for frugal cooking. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of details on how to meal plan right now because I have other episodes on that, and that's not really what I want to focus on this episode. I might do another one on it again at some point in the near future because I don't think I've done one on it in a while. But meal planning is so important to, it depending on how you like to plan things. For me, it makes a big impact in frugal cooking because I know exactly what I'm going to make every night. So I only purchase the ingredients that I need to make those meals. Before I started meal planning, I used to just kind of go to the grocery store and buy ingredients, and some would get used, some wouldn't get used, some would wind up going to waste. I didn't really know like exactly specifically what I needed for what meals I was going to be making during the week. So by meal planning, for me, it really saves me a lot of money because I'm only purchasing those items that I know I'm going to be cooking during the week. Another tip is to cook simple recipes with ingredients that you mostly have on hand. When you cook more simple recipes, you don't need to pick up a lot of new ingredients all the time. If you can cook with more basic ingredients, it makes grocery shopping a lot easier and a lot less costly, because what happens is sometimes you find recipes that have these very specific ingredients, and if it's not something that you're going to use regularly, you often will wind up maybe buying that ingredient and then not wind up using it all for the recipe you're making, and then you might wind up not using it at all in the future, because if it's not something that you're familiar with or something that you're used to using, you may wind up just using it for that recipe, and then it might sit and then wind up getting tossed in the trash at some point because you just don't have a use for it. Now, obviously, there's certain things that you're going to need a specific ingredient for if you're looking for like a certain taste or, maybe a certain holiday meal. We can't avoid buying those specialty ingredients at all. Sometimes we just do wind up needing them. But if you can try on a regular basis to mostly simplify your meals and cook with things that you have on hand, it'll save you a lot of money in buying those extra things. Another thing to think about is do as much prep work yourself as you can. Whenever you purchase food that has some prep work done prior to purchasing it, you're paying for that work having been done by someone else. For example, if you buy thin cut chicken breasts, they're going to cost more than if you buy the whole chicken, not whole like on the bone, but like the bigger ones that aren't like sliced thin. I'm sorry, but I'm not buying bone-in chicken breasts and slicing them. Maybe you guys do that, but I don't do that. That would probably save even more money, buying them on the bone and then slicing them into cutlets. I don't go that far. Good for you if you do. That's totally awesome. I just don't do that. I feel like I would never get it right. I'd probably waste more chicken than anything because I wouldn't know how to get close to the bone and all that. But anyway, I just mean regular like big boneless, skinless chicken breasts versus the thin cut ones. You're going to pay a lot more for the thin cut ones. And if you have to take the chicken out to prep it anyway, it's really only going to take you like a minute or two to cut it yourself. So consider if that might be worth the savings for you. Same with like fruit or vegetables that have been pre-cut. Those are really, really expensive. So definitely try to purchase those items and cut them up yourself. Plus, if you buy them pre-cut and you don't eat them right away, they're going to go bad much faster. So if you have the time to do the work yourself, you can save yourself a decent amount of money that way, and you'll also be much less likely to wind up wasting those if they don't get eaten in time. Another thing that I do all the time is skip or substitute ingredients. So I like to cook mainly, of course my dogs have to start barking like crazy. I'm hoping that's going to stop in 1 second so I don't have to stop recording. But it doesn't seem that way. I'm going to have to pause and, oh, maybe they've stopped. Maybe they will stop. This always happens to me when I try to sit in an area of my house that I think is going to be quiet. Anyway, so skip or substitute ingredients. I like to mainly cook simple ingredients, cook with simple ingredients that I typically have on hand. Like I was just saying before, it winds up costing a lot less money. But there's also times when a recipe calls for certain ingredients, and I'm not going to not make the recipe because I don't have those very specific ingredients. A lot of times I'll just skip certain ingredients. Like sometimes a recipe might call for a specific seasoning, and I'll just season it with something else that I think is a little bit similar to whatever the recipe calls for. Is the recipe going to come out exactly as intended? No. But unless you need it to come out exactly as intended for whatever reason, it's most likely still going to be a good meal. I've made mac and cheese with a mix of shredded cheddar and shredded mozzarella several times because that's what I happen to have. And that allowed me to use up extra cheese that might have gone bad otherwise. So if you're okay with kind of trying things out, like, I actually even made lasagna once with bow tie pasta, but it wasn't on purpose. It was because I went to go make the lasagna and then I realized I had made the whole filling and I did not have lasagna noodles, and I thought I did. So real quick, I decided to just make some bow tie pastas, and I boiled it up and I made like a lasagna casserole with the bow tie pastas, and it came out really great. So that's kind of not an example of me like purposefully doing that. That was a total mistake on my part. But my point is that very often you can skip or substitute ingredients to use the things that you have on hand, and your recipes will still come out really good. Even though they might not come out exactly as they were written, you can still have really good food and feel good about the fact that you're using up the things that you have already, and you're not having to go out and spend more money on things that maybe you didn't have on hand. And you can also oftentimes use up things that maybe would have gone bad otherwise if you didn't have a use for them in another recipe. Another thing you could do is try to use less meat or any expensive ingredient that's in a recipe. So I found for certain meals when the meat is not like the main dish, I've been able to kind of cut back on how much is being used and not really have that much of an impact on the meal. Like say for example, if I'm making like I don't know, maybe a sauce with ground beef. If you cut back some of the ground beef, the sauce is still going to be good. You're not really going to notice. If I'm maybe making like a casserole type dish with like cut up chicken in it, maybe I'll cut up the chicken in smaller pieces so that it's more spread throughout the casserole, but then use a little bit less. So any of those more expensive ingredients, depending on how they're used in the meal, of course, if it's like the main dish, you're not going to really be able to cut back because you want to make sure you have enough for whoever you're feeding. But if it's kind of part of a meal, a lot of times you can scale back a little bit on some of those more expensive ingredients and make the meal a little bit less expensive. Like for example, when I do like our Chipotle night that I do every few weeks, I don't make like a huge amount of chicken because by the time we have the chicken and the black beans and the rice and the cheese and all that, there's like more than enough food to make a bowl. So I don't need to make like a huge amount of chicken. So that's kind of just an example of where you could maybe cut back on a little meat or whatever. I'm just saying meat because usually that tends to be one of the more expensive ingredients. But whatever it is that's expensive that you're putting in your meal, if you can cut back on that a little bit, that can definitely save you some money on groceries. Freezing leftovers and making sure to use them too is really a huge money saver with cooking. For the most part in my house, our leftovers do wind up getting eaten within a couple of days. Either some kids will have them for a snack, or I'll take food left over for lunch or whatever. But sometimes things I know just are not going to get eaten, just because either we wind up with an abundance of food where I cooked a meal and people weren't home, and then I wind up cooking another meal, and now we have the leftovers from yesterday, and now we have today's leftovers, and there's just more food in the fridge than can possibly get eaten. If I see something and I know that there's pretty good chance it's not going to get eaten, and I know that it's something that will freeze well, sometimes what I'll do is just freeze it right away. Even if there's a chance someone might eat it, likelihood is it's not all going to get eaten. I'll go ahead and freeze it rather than waiting till I get to that point where I'm like, is it still good? Should I freeze it? Should I toss it? I hate getting to that point. So if it's something that I know can get frozen, I will freeze it right away. There's certain meals that just freeze really well, like French dip is one of the ones that I freeze all the time that comes out really good. Pulled pork, pulled chicken, any of those, like a lot of those like crock pot type meals. Some soups freeze really well. Some cooked meats freeze really well. Like meatballs do good. Sausage and peppers and onions, you could totally freeze that. Like any of those types of things that you can freeze, I try to freeze those right away. And then I also make sure to plan when I'm going to use them, because I don't want to stick something in the freezer and have it sit there for months and months and months and then get freezer burn, and then it's going to go in the trash anyway. So if I have leftovers from a meal and it's maybe something I can use for a lunch or for a side or for a dinner, I will actually put that on my meal plan. Or if it's for a lunch, because I don't really put lunches in my meal plans, I will just put a note like on next Saturday, say, heat up pulled chicken for lunch or whatever. And then that way I will make sure I'm not just sticking it in the freezer to sit there forever. I'm sticking it in the freezer with intention of using it on a certain day in the future so that it doesn't get wasted. Because the whole point of freezing it is so that it doesn't get wasted. So you definitely don't want to put it in the freezer and then have it sit there until it's freezer burn and then have to toss it anyway. Then you're just costing yourself even more money, because now you're taking the time to use a Ziploc bag. You're using time and money. You're using supplies to freeze it, and you're taking your time to pack it up. And then now you have to take your time again to throw it out anyway. So when you put stuff in the freezer, really try to make sure you have a plan to actually use it. And then another thing that I like to try and do is plan like at least 1 or 2 lower cost meals during the week. So some meals can end up being more on the expensive side. As any of you who listen to the meal plan episodes, you know, I make seafood once a week. I do a steak once a month. There's certain meals that just wind up costing more just because of the ingredients, and we're not going to necessarily not eat those things because we enjoy them. But to offset some of that cost, I try to plan for some lower cost meals during the week too, so that it kind of offsets some of the cost of those higher cost meals. So like one thing I like to do occasionally is breakfast for dinner. That's pretty inexpensive. The most expensive part of that meal is if I'm making like just regular bacon, eggs, and potatoes, is like the bacon, whether it's turkey bacon or regular bacon. But even still, that's not really super expensive. Eggs and potatoes are really inexpensive. So that's a good one. Different soups like crock-pot potato soup and grilled cheese is super cheap. Lentil soup is inexpensive. The chipotlinate that I do is really inexpensive. It's like rice and beans and some chicken, all relatively inexpensive costs. So if there are certain things that you like to have that are a little bit more expensive and you're trying to stick to a tighter budget, you don't have to give those things up. Just see where you can maybe do a couple of less expensive meals during the week to kind of offset the cost of that. And then the last tip that I want to share as far as cooking meals frugally is to buy things that are on sale and plan to use it. There's nothing worse than stocking up on an item that is on sale and then having to throw it out because you never got around to using it. When you purchase something that's on sale, you really want to make sure you put it to use. It does not have to be immediately, but you want to make sure that it's well within the time frame of when that food is going to go bad. So if you are a meal planner and you buy something that's on sale, pick a date and put that item on your meal plan, or pick a recipe that uses that ingredient that you stocked up on so that you can make sure you use it before it's too late. And if you're not a meal planner, then maybe just put a reminder on your phone or somewhere else so that you will make sure to use up that ingredient. Like say if you buy a ton of extra chicken breast. I don't know. I just always use chicken breast because we eat a ton of it. But if you buy a bunch of extra chicken breast, maybe put a note on your calendar to make something that uses that chicken breast in 2 weeks or whatever. It's just kind of a reminder that you have that item and you want to make sure you use it. If you buy maybe bread, you stock up on frozen bread. Maybe you plan to make some kind of sandwich. Like I like to buy frozen like Italian bread and stuff like that sometimes and stick it in the freezer when it's fresh, because then it comes out it tastes pretty good when you take it out. Not as good as if you bought it just now, like today, fresh, but it's still pretty good. So but you don't want to keep it in the freezer for too long because then it does get freezer burn. So say if I had some bread that I froze, I might want to make a reminder make pulled chicken in the crock pot this day and use up that bread or whatever. So it's just kind of making sure to be mindful when something goes in the freezer, whether it was because it was something you froze as leftovers or something that you purchased on sale, or even not necessarily in the freezer. If you have, you could have bought some kind of, I don't know, pickles, I don't know, whatever. You could have bought something that you saw on sale that's either in the fridge or the pantry or whatever. Again, you want to make sure that you just make yourself a note to use that item so that you don't buy things on sale and then have to throw them out in the end, because then that winds up saving you nothing. It winds up just costing you money, because then that's other food that you have to purchase again when you could have used the items you got on sale to cook your meals. So those are my frugal cooking tips, my cooking meals the frugal way tips. That's what I was naming this episode. So just being mindful, making sure you use up what you have and use up leftovers whenever you can. I forgot to mention that, but yeah, be very mindful of using up leftovers. If you have something in your fridge that you can use for leftovers the next night, even if it was part of a main dish, go ahead and put it out. A lot of times people will wind up eating it. So it doesn't have to be like a perfectly paired sides with a main dish every night. Put out leftovers and get them eaten up, because it just saves so much money to use up the food that you've already cooked and, not purchasing things and then having them go in the trash. So really, really be mindful too of trying to use up leftovers as best as you can, because that will definitely save you a lot of money. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I really thank you so much for listening, and I will see you back here next week. So thank you for checking in for this podcast episode. And don't forget, you can always email me with any questions or suggestions at lolasfrugallife@gmail.com. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Lola's Frugal Life. And you can find a blog post for most of my episodes and definitely all of my meal plan episodes at lolasfrugallife.com. You can also join our private listeners group at facebook.com/groups/lolasfrugallife. And if you enjoy the show, please make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen from. And I would love it if you would screenshot the show and tag me on Instagram so I could see you're listening. Also, if you can please take a couple of seconds to rate and review the podcast. Those ratings and reviews are what help the show come up better in search results so that other people can find this podcast. So that will really help me in growing my audience. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have an awesome day.